Hello, welcome to my second focus group about mental health. I have a question to ask to start off with, which is, what does mental health mean to you personally? Individual answers.
So I guess it's anything that's not physical health. So stuff that affects the way you think, the way you feel, the way you behave. And I suppose the big problem is that you can't see it. Like you can see problems with physical health.
Well, no, I suppose you can't see it. It's not like a broken arm, but you can see manifestations of it, or you think of manifestations of it.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's all about interpretation. So one person's mental health manifestations, another person would just see as being naughty if it's a child, or drunk if it's an adult, or delinquent if it's a teenager. And maybe that's the problem with mental health, that interpretation of it is so difficult and so varied that, you know, a broken leg can be proved by an X-ray, but schizophrenia is very difficult to diagnose.
I agree, it's different in every person and it affects them differently, so it is much harder to diagnose.
Yeah. And it relies on the diagnostic system that we use in this country, the DSM manual, that is a set of observable criteria but aren't provable through tests, blood tests, X-rays, etc.
Thank you. You've made me want to look up what DSM stands for now, which I'll do after this. Anything else anyone wants to add?
I suppose the only thing I'd like to add is that one of the things I've said recently at work is that psychiatric illness 30 years ago was perceived to be a collection of conditions that were really quite serious, like schizophrenia, like bipolar, like some really, really serious stuff, and people were perceived as being mad and locked up. Whereas these days, I think mental health, rather than psychiatric illness, is a much broader spectrum. And therefore I'm not sure that there are very many people around today who haven't been touched by a mental health issue of one sort or another.
I can't remember the stat, but pretty much everyone will experience a mental health issue or struggle at some point in their life.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
1 in 4 at any one time
Yeah.
Really?
experiences it,
Mm.
Gosh.
I think.
So some people have multiple episodes.
Because that's interesting, because what's the correlation between mental health episode and people's ability to manage them? Because you're absolutely right, I think everybody is permanently on a mental health spectrum. Everybody permanently has mental health challenges. But would you say then that that you would say that somebody didn't have a mental health issue if they were managing it well? But of course what we can't see is they think they're managing it, but because it's this invisible thing.
So if we compare it, and I think it is helpful to compare it to physical health sometimes, so if we compare it to a long-term chronic condition like underactive thyroid that many of my friends, because they're female and of a certain age, have, then you have hypothyroidism. The way to cope with that is through medication. But the hypothyroidism exists for the rest of your life, the same as diabetes. You know, once you're diabetic, you don't stop being diabetic. You might control it, but you don't stop being diabetic. So, you know, somebody like me who has been taking antidepressants on and off for the last 17 years, does that mean I'm depressed? Or does it mean that my depression is controlled? You know, if it was thyroid, I would still have the condition. But I suppose what you're saying, I think, is if there's no manifestation of it because it's been relatively controlled, does that mean I still suffer from it?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
In which case, I suppose, if we say that you do, then virtually everybody out there is depressed or anxious or stressed.
Moving swiftly on, if that's alright. We've got a couple of quiz kind of questions now. Just got some little sheets of paper for you. This is where I come onto the camera. to write answers on. Try 1, 2 and 3. And there's just 3 questions.
Just write the number of
Yeah,
the
just-
answer.
Just write 1, 2, 3 and I'll read them out one by one. And I wondered whether the ooh was because I gave you all potentially your favourite colours.
You did. I didn't want red.
I know. Alright, question number 1. It's multiple choice, so it's not that
Alright.
hard. I hope. What percentage of adults will experience an anxiety disorder at some point in their life? Do I give them, or should I just let you guess out of anything?
What an anxiety disorder is?
No, about the percentage. I've got 3 percentage answers here. One of them's right. It's
Oh,
multiple
right.
choice. Shall I give them
Give us
like
the choices.
Yeah,
10%, 25%, or 50%?
I don't want to be objectionable, but I'd really like, and you might not have this information, but I'd really like to know what constitutes a disorder and how you assess it.
Welcome to the next question, in a way.
Oh, right, okay. So,
Sort of.
was it
10, 25, or
25,
50? Okay, number 2, which is sort of on the line you were saying, is, I have the types as well, but how many different types of anxiety disorders do you think there are?
Do you
What-
mean how many has the profession deemed there are?
If you would like to phrase it that way.
We're getting options again.
Yes. 1, 4, 6. And finally, true or false. Depression is more common than anxiety. So you're more likely to have depression than anxiety. True or false?
That's a good one, isn't it?
So you started it with is, so
Okay, depression is
True or false?
true or false. Depression is more likely
Yeah.
than anxiety. True or false? Okay, number 1. Anybody want to share? They got number 1. I'll try to read the answers out.
50%?
I said that.
well, I think I was thinking the same as your mum, because disorder to me is
Disorder
quite serious.
is-
I went for 25, so I thought 50 was too high.
You see, prevalence and diagnosis are 2 completely different things.
So yes, that's why I went for 25.
So, I mean, I was tempted by 25 for the same reason.
Does a disorder mean that someone's not coping with it, so they seek out help and get diagnosed, or does it mean
That it exists.
that they just have it?
Yeah.
If you do your research, I don't think it's possible to find one website that tells you the same thing. So I base this all off. Most of this, I think, is from the NHS website because I thought it's the NHS.
Yeah.
But I think most of this is from the NHS. The answer's 25%.
Right. So it is diagnostic rather than prevalent.
I'm guessing so, yeah.
Mm.
Number 2.
6.
6.
6.
Yep. Do you want to know what they are? Or
I know generalised anxiety disorder.
GAD.
Yeah.
GAD. There's one called panic disorder.
Oh, yeah.
OCD.
OCD.
Social anxiety. It just says phobias and
Yeah.
PTSD.
PTSD.
And they're all grouped under anxiety.
Because if you have PTSD, let's say, then it's anxiety about an event. So then, like, if you're I know it's not just about soldiers, but if you're a soldier from the war, it's anxiety about what you've been through, what you've seen, and
See, I read a book once many years ago that suggested that we could transfer our anxiety disorders from one life to another. So if you believe that we live more than one life, which I currently believe, because I often wonder where I get my low-level PTSD from, and I can only think that it comes from a previous life. Do you think I'd bark in mad?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
We shouldn't say bark in mad in a conversation about it as well, should we?
And number 3, which is the one I'm most curious about, although it's only 2 choices.
Well, I said false, because I
So-
think probably there's more anxiety around than depression.
Well, I went false, and I only went false because to me anxiety is lower than depression, and therefore I think everybody has anxiety. So
Yeah,
everything at varying times.
I think everyone's had anxiety at some point because of just. I think anxiety is more environmental.
Just daily
Depression's
life.
based on events and things that happen. 'Cause everyone can have anxiety about an
Yeah.
exam or just something that's happened in their life.
Well-
And it just comes and goes. Whereas depression, for the most part, stays for longer periods. I think.
And also that's raised a question actually in my mind about whether anxiety is more what they call exogenous, so it's triggered by external events, and depression is more actually you're just the kind of character who's predisposed towards it. Because you know, I'm sure that more introverts, you know, people who are much more focused upon themselves than others, are more likely to suffer from depression because they think things through. And having worked with so many extroverts, you know, and saying, oh, but what about blah? And they go, oh, I never thought about that. And I think, oh, how lovely not to think about things to the extent that I think about them.
Well, I feel like I have to make these questions harder for the final group because it's false. We got it right. Which I was curious about because I thought depression would have been higher, but
Yeah. But again, darling, it's about whether it's... Okay.
so sorry. Red battery, Reading flash battery. Might not be able to do the third activity. Last activity is I've got just a few because the website I looked at only mentioned a few. It wasn't the NHS, there was a different one. Some, I don't know what words you have, disorders or whatever, like anxiety, depression, OCD, written down. I think there's, should be five. And this little website said that every 7 years a survey is done in England to measure the number of people who have different types of mental health problems. And according to the most recently published one, which was in 2016, they ordered these are the main ones, in order of which was the most common and which was the least common.
Yeah.
I have percentages, which I didn't write down, but I've just got them written on paper, and saying that up here is the most common and down here is the least. Just order those.
So we all want to know that anxiety is higher than depression.
That's got to be one of the higher ones.
Yeah. I would say that bipolar is the lowest.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then maybe...
That would be the order I put them in, but I'm quite happy to move them if...
Yeah, I would agree those are the two highest. Not sure about... Sure. I mean, I'm still thinking, but...
I think OCD is more prevalent than we think because OCD isn't just about washing hands, it's about obsessive compulsive thoughts as well as behaviours.
Well, I've known lots of people who say that they're OCD and have it, but then, you know, you observe behaviour in other people who do things that might be that, but they never admit it.
Yes.
Again, I wouldn't say I'm OCD, but there are some things that I feel better when they're in a certain way or
Any words?
organised. Or
Any words from I believe the only fire sign at the table?
Any words, what's that?
Just keeping quiet because we're on the subject of OCD.
But I want him to speak.
What do
I
you
think
think
yes,
about the order?
yes, I mean, I'm not massively sure exactly totally what that means, and I mean, this is interesting because, you know, historically, you know, I would have thought that was just down to service people, but now I'm sure it's, you know, service personnel in the military. But now,
I'd love to do a study on how many women with bad childhood experiences ended up with PTSD because I don't think I had postnatal depression. I think I had PTSD.
Would you like to nominate a spokesperson to read them out because you can't read them on camera? The order.
we've put anxiety, the generalised one at the top, depression, OCD, PTSD, and then bipolar as the least common.
Which is very interesting because it's if I ordered them before looking at it, that's what I would have